What is up, everyone? Welcome back to A Sum of Two Buses, and today we're going to talk about my iPFL and referencing. Let's first start off by talking about referencing and the importance of using reference tracks or tune tracks. How many of you have been mixing in the box as of late, and you think you get it to sound really good, and then you play a commercially released song, and you're like, my mix is terrible? Well, you're not alone. That happens to me all the time. It continues to happen to me, but that's the importance of referencing. It's a way of refreshing the ears or cleansing the palate. When I'm talking about referencing, I'm talking about jumping between commercially released material and your material. It's so important that even plugin manufacturers are making plugins to instantiate in your DAWs. It's kind of a way to keep you from mixing yourself into a hole. Okay, well then how are you using referencing with live audio? Well, if you've ever tuned a PA with a tune track or a particular song you know, you've already been doing it. Wait, tuning a PA? What do you mean? When I say tuning a PA, it's basically the ability to EQ the outputs of your console in order to make your sound translate for whatever acoustic space or speakers that you're about to do the show on. So if you don't have a speaker processor, do you apply the EQ on your main bus? I actually do not. In the previous episode in the whiteboard section, we talked about the importance of getting your mix to sound a certain way at the left-right main bus. Then we send it off to your matrix feeds, and that's where we would be applying our EQ. All right, now as you can see, my left-right right here is on my far left bank, these two faders, if you can see. And these are all the dedicated speaker outputs depending on whatever your setup is. We have right now a very common setup, just left, right, sub, front fill. Now that we switched views, you can notice that the EQ on my left, right is flat, right? It is flat. And remember, our last episode, we talked about the insert and SuperRack. That's where all my processing is happening. On the insert A, it comes back to the bus, and I don't have to use the PEQ or the graphic on this. When you get into your acoustic space, you would end up EQing at this level right here. This is a non-destructive way to translate your mix. And now the idea is you have your speakers tuned to your certain position using your iPod reference right here. And now if you decide that you need a little more gas for showtime, you can just bring this guy up and it sends the same level to all these and keeps the relationships the same. That's the importance of matrixing. Now that we are all on the same page of how we can utilize matrices for sending our mix out, let's talk a little bit about the iPFL. What is the iPFL? The iPFL is a dedicated stereo group that goes nowhere. I only use this to post-fader listen or solo my house music in my headphones. Why don't you just make your iPod stereo and solo it from there? Well, first of all, I break out my iPod into dual mono input channels in order to send them discretely to each corresponding speaker matrix. Doing it this way does two things. One, I avoid sending a stereo sum of my iPod to a mono matrix. Two, this allows me to route my iPod channels around my left-right bus and its processing. Doing it this way keeps my iPod channels from being processed. Why unprocessed references, and why does that matter? Because we are engineers and we're in search of the truth. If I were to play my iPod through my left-right processing, I would be altering the sound of my references. The importance is to be able to hear what the actual speakers sound like and what your actual reference tunes sound like on the PA and in the acoustic space. So why do you need this iPFL group? Well, now that our iPod is in dual mono, if you were to solo each side of your iPod, it would sum in mono in your headphones. So to get around this, I set up the iPFL, which is a stereo group that goes nowhere, in order to just solo the iPod dual mono input channels. So why don't you just duplicate your iPod channels in stereo? Well, I could do that, but I opted to do it this way for two reasons. One, I like to calibrate my mix the best I can using things like smart and metering plugins in order to match the volume of my show versus the volume of my iPod or tuning tracks or house music, however you want to call it. This helps me tune the PA at a specific volume and keeps me from overexciting the room too much, which in turn might make me EQ too much. I prefer to tune the PA at show volume in order to find all the ugliness in either the box, that I'm working with that day or the room. And then once the show starts, I can decide what EQ to give back based on the capacity of the show, the temperature, and the humidity. And two, since I run my solo bus in PFL mode, I can solo my left-right mix. And if I'm soloing my PFL bus, which these two channels are sending to, and if I'm copying the volume between my iPod channels and not changing the output of the group, I am still within the same gain in my headphones between my two matched channels. Why do you care about headphones so much? Because I also use headphones as another way of referencing when tuning a PA. This is a classic Dave Rat trick that can help with consistency and prevent ear fatigue. I highly recommend you check out his YouTube channel and check out his YouTube video on how to tune a live sound system. And while you're at it, check out his Mighty Headphone Quest. It's a really cool adventure finding affordable and flat headphones. Now, if you haven't tried the headphone trick, you should give it a shot. If you have a pair of headphones you trust, it's definitely worth trying out. Using this trick can be helpful in trying to sort out your high mids. A hot 6K to 9K issue in a PA is a lot easier to spot in your headphones instead of hearing it rattling around in an empty venue. Now, the cool thing about setting it up this way is now you brought in the studio trick of referencing into your live world. Now you can use your iPod references as a way to reference EQ curves and low-end balance to your mix. Just to give clarity on the desk like we had before, we have our left-right channels, right? This is our mains. This is my left matrix, my right matrix, my sub, my front fill, right? And then this is the stereo record, the VIP and your LD mix, right? These are our pre-sends. And then here's my iPFL, and here's my iPod channels, right? And my iPod channel sends to this iPFL. I never have to change this fader position. I just leave it where it is. All right, in this demonstration, we'll be using the same loop that we were using last week, My Strange Addiction by Billie Eilish, and we'll be using as our tune track our intro music for A Sum of Two Buses. So please enjoy. All right, so now we're ready to tune our PA. Let's go ahead and play our tune track, right? Short and sweet. And I mute. All right, and doing something like this will allow you to make your adjustments in your mix. Let's further explain some of the advantages of matching your mix to your iPod or reference channels. Say you're about to start tuning your PA. You have your main left-right mix at unity, and you have your speaker matrices all at unity as well, and the EQs are all flat. Now you're ready to bring up your tune tracks. You bring up your tune tracks and realize the volume that you want to run your show is around maybe -6 dB, right? Well, if your tuning tracks are at the approximate same volume as your left-right main bus, this will give you an indicator of where to start your mix. Let's go ahead and just test and see if our mixes match. About to start our tune track. We'll bring it up slowly to -6. Pretty close, right? Let's bring it down to -12. Back to unity. As you can tell, my mix and my Ipod channels are approximately the same volume. You can even go as far as compensating at your matrix outputs in order to get your mix to land at unity. And like I said before, if you're using the headphone trick and the iPFL, these changes will translate in your headphone out of your console. Last but not least, being mindful of the volume that you're tuning at can yield to less excitement in the room, which can also yield to less cutting in your PA. And now that you're being mindful of tuning at a specific volume, running your show at a specific volume, and coupled with being mindful of your low end and the EQ curve of your mix in reference to your tuning or reference iPod channels, this could be especially handy for tight time constrictions for tuning and sound check. Like the situation that I was stuck in last year for Coachella. I had 30 minutes to tune. I couldn't hear any live inputs through the PA due to our elaborate stage design and video floor. So I had to heavily rely on my virtual soundcheck and my tuning references in order to find the appropriate volume without having a live band or any live inputs going through the PA. So needless to say, that's why it's so important to try to find as many advantages as you can in order to make yourself as successful as possible, even in the most difficult situations. So what's next on the agenda? Well, next episode, we'll be talking about the DLive summing and what happens when you run the desk in the red. Well, that's it for this episode of A Sum of Two Buses. If you dug it, please like, please share, please subscribe. Until next time, take care and be safe.